Deebo Samuel traded from the Niners to the Washington Commanders for a fifth-round pick. The deal becomes finalized March 12th. That's the start of the new league year that Dan just referenced. And here's what Deebo brings to D.C. He is a yards after the catch aficionado. Deebo averaged over 8 yards of yak per catch last year, the highest among wide receivers, and that just so happens to be a weakness for the Commanders. Washington ranking no higher than 21st in the NFL in yards after the catch per reception last season. So we have another weapon for Jaden Daniels. Adam, what more can you tell us about this trade and how it got done?
Listen, Deebo Samuel and Kyle Shanahan talked during Deebo's exit meeting at the end of the year, and I think both sides recognized the fact that they would be moving on from one another. Deebo requested a trade. He was allowed to seek permission to go seek a trade partner. There were a few teams that expressed varying degrees of interest in Deebo Samuel. The Houston Texans checked into it. The Denver Broncos checked into it. But the one team that really stayed on it was the Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders general manager is Adam Peters, who came over from San Francisco. And it's interesting because the Commanders always had wondered whether or not it'd be worth adding Brandon Ayuk to team up with Jaden Daniels, being that they played together at Arizona State. But in the end, they do go for a 49ers wide receiver, but it turns out to be Deebo Samuel, somebody that can complement Terry McLaurin, make the offense better, give them another weapon, and they don't have to give up much compensation. I think a lot of people surprised to see just a fifth-round pick in return for Deebo Samuel, but you have to remember that they're taking on Deebo's full contract, over $17.5 million, and that is why the 49ers could not get more in return for a player who had meant so much to the 49ers franchise over the year. Instead, Washington gives up a 5 and gets another weapon for Jaden Daniels.
Yes, he joins scary Terry McLaurin, and he's so multifaceted. Mina, how do you see Deebo fitting into Cliff Kingsbury's plans?
Perfectly. I mean, this is like a no-brainer, honestly, when the deal was announced. First thing that comes to mind, Dan, I'm sure you had the same thought, Cliff is going to call a million screens. He already called a million screens. He loves tagging those RPOs with bubbles, tunnel screens. Look, Deebo Samuel might not be what he was a few years ago. He still breaks tackles better than most receivers, and he's still more elusive than most running backs. So the yak you get from him is incredibly enticing. And then the other thing I would highlight, you talked about his versatility. The Commanders, when they used 2-back sets, 21 personnel, they had the highest EPA per play of any team in the NFL last year. Now imagine putting Deebo Samuel back there, as they did in San Francisco. Suddenly you're getting personnel mismatches. You get him on linebackers. This is a team that loves to use no huddle, so defenses can't substitute. I just think it is a seamless fit for this offense based on what we saw last year, Dan.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense for me. If I had to use a phrase to describe Washington's offense, it's pace and space. That's kind of their bread and butter and who they want to be. Mina talked about it, and we've talked about it for a year now. The pace on offense, that no huddle, and then the space that creates, sometimes because of the tempo, sometimes because of how wide their formations are. And when you combine them together, that's why you get so many of those perimeter screens. No quarterback in the NFL threw more perimeter screens last year than Jaden Daniels. So you're talking about potentially lining them up in the backfield and giving them the ball, absolutely. But then you're also talking about being in this no-huddle offense and giving a guy the ball on the perimeter right now that is as good with the ball in his hands out in space as anybody in the NFL. And this is there's a simplicity to that is so simple for an offense and a quarterback. I do think that Washington is fascinating, though, MK, because of this. And I loved Washington last year. I want to give them their flowers and credit them. I also don't think that they can fall into the trap thinking they're that close. 5 wins on the last play of the game, essentially, that's not likely in the NFL. And so while they're encouraged and intriguing, they're not one Deebo Samuel away from chasing down Philadelphia. There are still flaws in this roster that they got to have a very much so attack mindset and not resting on the success of last year mindset.
Yeah, they just have to look back sort of to the Houston Texans, right, and how they shocked everybody, high expectations. But that schedule also gets tougher. A lot of things happen in that second year. Well, the big news from the NFL over the weekend, the Niners trading their multi-purpose receiver Deebo Samuel to the Washington Commanders in exchange for a fifth-round pick, which reunites him with Washington GM Adam Peters, who is in San Francisco. He is due $21.7 million in 2025. He will pair with Terry McLaurin, the only receiver in NFL history with 20-plus receiving and 20 rushing yards. So this leaves the Niners with some questions regarding their skill players. Christian McCaffrey, as you'll recall, was very limited last season, just 4 games because of Achilles, calf, and knee injuries. Brandon Ayuk tore his ACL and his MCL in Week 7. They're not sure when he's going to return. Juwan Jennings led the team in targets because of all this, almost as many as he had in his first 3 seasons combined. And Ricky Pearsall was shot in August, so he missed the first 6 games of the season. He really struggled to get going. So given everything we've just said, Mina, what is the impact of losing Deebo for this offense?
Yeah, Hannah, it's hard to know exactly what the Niners need to do in terms of their skill positions without knowing the status of both Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey. How healthy will they be at the beginning of next year? Because when I think about the decline of the Niners offense, yes, some of that had to do with Deebo's production going down a bit, but a much bigger part had to do with the absence of those players. What Ayuk gives you on the perimeter in terms of stretching the field, beating man coverage, winning on third down, McCaffrey is the straw that stirs the drink, on that offense. I would say if Ayuk is healthy with the combination of him and Pearsall, you're then thinking, okay, we need to focus on someone who can give us yards after the catch. But that's a question mark. I think they know better than anyone what they can expect out of him moving forward.
Yeah, only 6 wins last season. Dan, what should their top priority be?
Offensive line. It's become a bad unit, and that's shocking to say for a Kyle Shanahan offense. Obviously, you got to re-sign Brock Purdy. There's no question about that. But this is an offensive line that a couple years ago was one of the best in football. And if you just look at year after year how much it's gotten worse, and it's a little bit of maybe the lack of people getting open of last year, but this isn't just a 24 thing. And I think organizationally, they really need to look at their offensive line and see scheme, people, all those things combined on top of quarterback play. How do they make sure that the quarterback doesn't play under so much pressure?
Yeah, and only Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes have had a better QBR than Purdy the last 3 seasons, which brings us to one more.
How's it going, everybody? Villa Sports Network here. Just want to thank you guys for your support on the channel. Thank you guys for watching the video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Also want to kind of remind you to don't forget to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment on the video if you like as well. But regardless of the fact, thank you again for your support, and hope to see you on the next video.